Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Ben Backus.
And I'm Kevin Paulin, and welcome to the Falling Up Podcast, where we have conversations about turning obstacles into opportunities. And on today's show, we have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Tim Shriver.
Tim wears many, many hats, and I'm going to try to break a couple down so you know who we had the privilege of having a conversation with today. So Tim is the founder of Unite. He is also the chairman of the board for the Special Olympics. In addition, he is a best-selling author and a board member for CASEL, Advanced Social Emotional Learning. And overall, he's just genuinely a great dude.
Tim is also a Red Sox fan. Go
That's
Yankees.
Right, baby. That's right.
Awesome time and a great conversation. So without further ado, welcome to the Falling Up Podcast.
Can we kind of start from the beginning? I know it sounds like you met Lamont when Lamont was in high school and you were his teacher. Was that the first way that you started your professional career? Was that teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably the ripe old age of 28 or maybe 27, 29 when I met Lamont. So I'd been in education already for 7 or 8 years, maybe. But yeah, I went to college. I mean, I grew up in a family that was very committed to politics and to political action, very immersed in themes around justice and peace. A dad who was involved in public service around things like the Peace Corps and founder of Head Start and Job Corps and things like that. Mom was interested in intellectual disability and disability rights and created the Special Olympics movement and things like that. So when I got to college, I was committed. I was excited about being an actor, an agent, making a difference. But I didn't want to do it at the level they were operating. I mean, I respected what they were doing, but I wanted eye to eye. I wanted heart to heart. I wanted to meet people where they were, try to understand their lives, try to dig deeper into the authentic story, not so much the policy or the speech or the program design, but the person. And, I just got... it was all by fluke. I ended up, a friend of mine was in the teaching program where I was in college, and I started when I was a junior in college doing practice teaching at neighborhood high school in New Haven, Richard C. Lee High School. I started teaching U.S. history at that high school when I was a senior in college, and I just fell in love with the experience of being around young people who were right on the knife's edge. These were young people who were, funny and charming and full of energy and, mischievous and all that kind of stuff. But also, they were living on the edge of the American story. They were living, these were primarily kids of color and Latino kids and primarily kids from low income backgrounds and primarily kids whose families were struggling economically. So, they had no wiggle room. There's no margin for error. My friends, if they got caught smoking pot, their parents got called. These kids, if they got smoking pot, they got locked up, and the list went on and on. It created a certain, it taught me a lot about our culture and how wildly different the experiences in the American culture, which is not something I learned, maybe I heard it in a textbook, but it's different when you're living with folks and, they're moving apartments and, coming in and out of trouble with the law and coming in and out of scholarships. These were not all kids in trouble. They were kids doing extraordinarily great things. We were sending kids to great colleges and trips to Washington, D.C. and debate clubs and kicking ass against suburban schools and all kinds of things. And, these were rock star kids. But the frustration with the American mainstream was palpable. And I felt like, I was sort of selling a 2-car garage and a house in the suburbs and a good income if only you do your homework. And a lot of these kids were like, that's bullshit, man. That's just not true, and I don't believe you. and I don't buy what you're selling. And I realized I needed to learn how to listen more deeply, and I needed to learn how to understand more intimately, and I needed to learn how to navigate more authentically my own story. You know, I needed to, because those kids, you know, they had like an authenticity meter that was like, you know, like an X-ray machine. Just saw right through you. And all the bullshit, you know, that I was bringing to the table, they were like, mm-mm. I was like, I don't know what you mean, you know, like, yeah, after a couple of years, I started to realize what they were looking at. And they were looking at a person who was hiding, you know, and a person who was selling a false bill of goods, and a person who didn't know how to speak from the heart, and a person who didn't have a lot of empathy for real struggle. You know, I was judgmental and, you know, just a pain in the ass. I was an asshole, you know, as a teacher. And, you know, I had colleagues who helped me a lot. So, I mean, it wasn't just the kids. But anyway, it was a long way of saying by the time I got to Lamont, I had been chastened and I don't want to say I'd been changed. I mean, I moved into the neighborhood for several years. I had a lot of religious experiences that really changed me, moved me, opened me up, cracked me open, quieted me down. And I became a better man because of those kids. And I think I became a better teacher. And I know I became a better listener. So, I mean, I don't know, you didn't ask me all that, but that's a little bit the story. By the time I got to Lamont, I was teaching, but I was running an after school program. And, you know, one of the teachers came to me, sorry for going on so long. A teacher came to me and said, you know, we've got all these young women in our parenting class. I don't know, we had about 25, 30 kids who had babies, women who had babies, who were taking parenting classes. And the teacher of the parenting class said, you know, I can't get any of the guys. Can't get any of these dads involved. Could you get them involved? See if you can get a group going with them. And I said, well, I don't know who they are. He said, well, I can give you the names of some of the guys. And, you know, maybe you could call them together and maybe you could have a discussion with them. Maybe you could talk to them about taking more responsibility for their children and, you know, developing the skills of a dad and stuff like that. So anyway, I put up a PA announcement. I had about 10 names, such and such come to the main office after school, and like one kid showed up. and anyway, he said, look, you know, you got it all wrong. We got to change this all around. You can't be doing it the way you're trying to do it. Let's call this the leadership group. And I was like, okay, I'm good with that. So the next week we announced the formation of the Young Men's Leadership Group. And I called off the same 10 names. All the guys came, and about 10 more guys came. And within a couple of weeks, we had like 25 guys in the group. They didn't come every week, but it was after school, you know, and that's the group that Lamont came and joined. And it was just all guys who came. It was almost like a support group. You know, I wasn't trained as a counselor in those days, but it was just, I was a facilitator. And the whole premise here was that we, the young men in the group, want to commit to supporting themselves and becoming leaders in the school. And that's all. That was it. And we started talking. We started planning events. We planned dances and basketball games and fundraisers in the community. We painted houses for people who were indigent. We had conversations and discussion groups. We talked to kids who were getting in trouble. We visited friends who were locked up for whatever reason, stuff like that. And it just became a very powerful network of young men who wanted to be leaders. I mean, that's the bottom line. You know, I didn't tell them to be leaders. They wanted to be leaders. And Lamont was terrific. I mean, he got, you know, he had his run in, you know, after that, after he was part of the group. But, you know, I think the group made an impact on him as it did on me. I mean, I was a young man too. Wasn't as young as they were, but I was a young man, and I looked to a lot of those guys, even today. I look to a lot of them as role models, as support systems, as teachers to me. I mean, I was the teacher, but we were in a time. I mean, you know, this was during the crack epidemic. There's a lot of, you know, I mean, there was a lot of violence in the neighborhoods, a lot of violence in the school. And there were a lot of good kids trying, hoping, praying, pleading with themselves, with their families, with their teachers. They wanted a shot, and no matter how beat down the system seemed to be, the kids wanted a shot. And most of them, but many of them, too many did not get the shot they wanted, but many of them did. And Lamont is a great example of a guy who got beat down about as far as you can go. I mean, he was within an inch of his life, and look at him now.
Yeah.
Look at him now. Great human being.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on what kind of early on in what you were saying. You mentioned this point where you were able to, from how I heard it, was develop this pretty much incredible self-awareness to say, hey, if I just go about it without really trying to empathize and see everyone's situation, really engulf myself in the environment, I'm just going to kind of be going through business as usual and maybe not making an impact in all these individuals' lives. How did that come about? How did so many individuals that listen to this podcast are in that spot where the blinders are on? I don't really know which direction I'm going. How do I become really good at something or develop passion for something? Was there anything that kind of comes to mind that really either promoted or prompted that self-awareness? Was there people?
Well, I mean, I hate to say this because it's not a very positive message, but I think failure really does it. The first step in the Alcoholics Anonymous system is, you admit that you become powerless, right?
Right.
And at a certain point, maybe 2 or 3 years into my work as a teacher, I mean, I worked around the clock. I had friends who graduated from college. They went to New York and on Wall Street and Boston and this place and that place and graduate school and law school. I didn't go anywhere. I went to the neighborhood, to the school. I was 12 months. I was in the summer. I mean, I gave this everything I had, and I sucked. The kids basically just told me over and over again, nope. And there were different points, but there were several moments in which I just realized, I like an alcoholic, I needed help. And it was going to have to come from me changing, not from changing other people. It wasn't the kids' fault. I couldn't blame this person, that person. I won't name names. I couldn't blame them for not doing their homework. I couldn't blame her for getting pregnant. I couldn't blame him for getting suspended. I had to blame myself for not being able to hear, listen, and heal the relationships that these kids had. So I found myself kind of bottoming out, really. My dream was that I was going to be this agent of change, and I was doing bad. I wasn't doing well. And I think the only thing, I think 2 things, maybe 3 things made a difference. First is I never questioned whether the work was important. It wasn't like I gave up on, like some people say, well, that public education sucks, or teaching sucks, or the school system sucked. It wasn't you. No, I knew those things. I knew the kids and the system could work. That's number 1. Number 2, I knew the kids were good. I knew that. I mean, I could, it was not hard to tell. You could just see. I mean, I was laughing. I was enjoying, the kids were fantastic. I was fascinated by adolescence and by all the energy and, all the chaos and all the confusion and the sex and the violence and the desire. And just like, I knew the kids were good. And then the third thing that I guess probably made the big difference is that when I was really at rock bottom, I felt like I had a faith in a higher power. In my case, I was raised in a very strict religious household. And so I was on my knees, I remember reading at one point or another a quote from Lincoln, which was, I went to my knees because I had nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. And I was on my knees, and I felt like at a certain point, all that, not being willing to give up on the kids, the system, or God, made me rely in a new way on opening myself up to a higher power and listening more deeply to the kids. I just decided, I got to listen to these. I got to stop talking and start listening. And don't get me wrong. That didn't make me the best teacher in the city or anything like that. I didn't turn into some magician. This is not one of those stories where, all of a sudden, I'm on Oprah and, I made $1 million because I was such a great teacher or something like that. That's not the way it worked for me. And I don't think it's the way it works for most people. I think all it did was give me a rudder to navigate an otherwise, really difficult and painful challenge that many people were facing, including me. And that they're still facing. It's not like it went away. It's not like where I taught, the neighborhoods I lived in, they're, unfortunately, I'm not embarrassed, but I'm sad to say, that things have gotten in many ways better, but it's still very tough. And the odds are still way, way, way too unfair. So we need people in education and, good people in education, in mental health, in law enforcement, in business, in politics to make these pathways to opportunity real and not just make them illusions.
Yeah. So a question that comes to mind, when you were working with the students, was there different qualities that a student would demonstrate that would make you more likely to kind of want to reach out or be a mentor figure? Or was it, hey, I'm just trying to touch anyone who's willing to listen?
That's a good question. There are some things kids say, that stick with you for life. And, I probably shouldn't say it because nowadays it sounds weird, but I fell in love with kids over and over again. Thank God nothing ever inappropriate. But I don't know. Sometimes kids just maybe as a teacher too. It's different from a parent. Of course, parents love their kids, but as a teacher, sometimes a kid will just say things. A student will just look you in the eye. There were students that. Charlie Salters, he used to kid me about my sister all the time. And he was just hilarious, tough as nails, linebacker on the football team. I just couldn't get enough of him, and Tashina Middleton and, really wanted to learn more with a couple of other young women, wanted to learn more about South Africa. So we started a little group. This was during the apartheid year. We started a little study group about South Africa. And I would come in once a week with just articles to read. In the old days, you clip out articles and stuff like that. And those kids just they just wanted more and more and more of understanding how a country like South Africa could exist. This is in the 80s. And the guys and the young men, Dougie Bethea, he's the student who told me to change the name of the group. And he had a drill team he started, and still to this day, he still runs drill teams in New Haven. He just oozes charm. And I think the only thing, maybe back to your question, Ben, is just I think kids who are hungry. Kids who are hungry, they don't necessarily express it as hungry for college or hungry for grades, just hungry. Just. And I think in so many ways, this is maybe something that happened to me, and because it's not the community I came from, right? Look at me, I'm white. I grew up in a privileged background. I went to mostly private schools throughout my life, with only a couple of exceptions. I believed in justice. I believed in ending racism. I believed in peace, not war. I believed in those things, but I didn't understand the raw nature of the frustration and the anger and the desire that came to me. I'm not going to generalize, that I met in those kids. And it made me, can I say this in a strange way? It made me jealous. I wasn't jealous of the adversity, and I wasn't jealous of, the economic struggle and stuff like that. But I was jealous of the authenticity. Wow. The kids just fuck you, Mr. Shriver.
That raw and uncut.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would have been scared to say that to a teacher who was an asshole. They weren't.
Yeah, not me. I got plenty of classes.
And I'm not coming to school tomorrow. Why not? I don't want to. You can't say that. Oh, yes, I can. This school is full of shit. Okay, well, I thought that a lot, but I never said it. So I don't know. That sounds so negative, but maybe you know what I mean a little bit. There was just something about telling the truth, that was real about this experience, and I don't know. I just felt like, and maybe this will sound wrong too, but I just felt like I had a little glimpse into the Black experience in America, and it made me feel so. I just felt like at some level, again, don't take this the wrong way. I'm talking in public. What can I say? I just felt like the key to the future of the country was to understand the Black experience. That's what I left with. I remember, W.B. Du Bois, the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. And I was like, this is the late 80s, and I'm like, what's going to be the problem of the 21st century? The problem of the 21st century is going to be the problem of the color line. Until we address it, until we listen, right. Until we hear this story. And then, the music and the Black church and, the preaching and Black theology and the poetry and the community and the drama. August Wilson was doing his plays in New Haven at the time. And James Earl Jones lived down the block from me, coming to act in them. And there was just something that, I don't know, I felt like I traveled halfway around the world and I'd gone a block from where I started. And it wasn't, I felt in some ways ashamed of my background and my color and my gender and all that stuff. But at a much deeper level, I just felt a profound appreciation for and admiration for and hunger to be supportive of the experience of these kids. Yeah. Does that sound, you can tell me, Tim, you're sounding a little nuts right now, or
No, I think not at all. I think in general, a lot of suburban areas have this disconnect, and the disconnect caused a lack of empathy. Where you got to experience the culture, you got to experience the inner city, and that grew onto your empathy for the struggle that's the inner city for blacks and browns alike. So it's an experience. It's an experience that you were fortunate to experience and grew you into the man you are today.
It helped me a lot. And it also, I think the thing, this is now we're post George Floyd's murder and stuff like that. Right. It seems like the whole world is coming around to saying we got to pay attention to this issue. I think that's a great thing. I don't know. I hope people understand how complicated it is to really understand another person's life. And I hope that becomes at some level the goal of this period. It's not just throwing around political adages, running a training program or having a diversity educator. That's good stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against it. But there's a lot more work to do than, checking the box and, reading a book and, running around saying, oh, now I understand. I just read, X or Y or Z. And I don't dismiss any of that, the importance of it, that it's a good trajectory to start on. But the real path is at a level of compassion and depth and empathy and understanding on both sides. People, we got to meet. Of course, people that are in positions of disproportionate power have a greater responsibility to correct things than people who aren't. But there's a lot of healing that needs to go on in our country, and recognizing the wounds is a first step, but doing the work of healing is more complicated than reading a book or.
What you said something really profound there. The idea, how important it is to know that we are all on these individual journeys and we all see things through our eyes. Have you heard of what's his name? David Foster Wallace. Mm-hmm. He was an English professor, and he had a wonderful commencement speech. And at the core of the speech, he talked about that. It's realizing, hey, I'm going to see the world through my eyes, and I have to know that every other person, right? When that car cuts me off and I take it personally, so too is every other person has those experiences. And when we can have those experiences together, this can be just such a beautiful place. But it's when we don't take that into account that, hey, they're against me, I'm against them.
Well, if it's a zero-sum game, it's just a war of all against all. And frankly, why wouldn't, if you got a lot of money, why wouldn't you fight to get more?
Right.
If it's not, if the world isn't good and decent and run by love, then screw it.
Right.
And the only way we're going to get out of this is to have a restoration in some way, spiritually, culturally, politically, of the heart. I mean, this is why I ended up developing a field called social and emotional learning, so that we could reintegrate head and heart in schools, because kids can't learn without it. Guess what? They don't learn without it. You don't learn if you don't have a relationship. That's what Jim Comer taught me, 35 years ago at the Yale Child Study Center. Learning is a relationship. We have to cultivate relationships, strengthen them, develop them, build bonds. If teachers aren't trained to do that, they're not going to be effective at teaching. Mm-hmm. So it's, we built a whole field designed to balance the focus in schools on the head with the heart. And we need to do that in politics. We need to do it in business. There needs to be social and emotional learning for business, for political leaders. And we've got to build, civic organizations dedicated to things like empathy and perspective taking and, inclusion and moral courage and silence, practices of silence and self-emptying. I know that sounds like it's supposed to be outside of the cultural, but that's the only way we get there, in my view.
So I want to segue a little bit into the religion and spirituality realm. I was listening to you speak. I forget what it was, but I just wrote down the quote. You said, "The first space of calm, of light, of gentleness, of trust is within." And I thought that was such it spoke to me in so many ways. So I just can you clarify that a little bit, just to get a little more understanding? Because what I take from that is this idea of, if I really listen, if I really become aware, the answers are kind of there. The connectiveness is there. But that is such a hard place to get to. And can you just kind of take us through a little bit of, I know growing up.
Well, look, I think every religious tradition, and now most mental health practitioners too, and now neuroscience too, they'll all tell you, they all have one thing in common. And it is that to understand what's outside you, you have no choice but to understand what's inside you. You just can't. Socrates said it 2,500 years ago. Neuroscience is telling us that today. Jesus said it. The Buddha said it. Muhammad said it. Moses said it. Rumi said it. St. John of the Cross said it. Howard Thurman said it. They all said it. I mean, read Howard Thurman's commencement speech at Spelman College. Go down inside, and when you go deep enough, I'm paraphrasing badly, what you're going to find that what you go down in yourself to find, you'll find everyone else too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there is a place, a stillness, a center within each of us. And the frantic, distracted, high-pressured world will do everything it can to keep you from getting there.
So what are some active skills that you use to help bring yourself there, or that you would recommend others use?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody has a tradition, right? So in the tradition I come from, there's a practice called centering prayer. And centering prayer at a very simple level is simply the idea of sitting still, following your breath, and not letting your attention be distracted by objects. So centering your attention within, and when thoughts come, you let them go. It's not wildly different from TM, not wildly different from mindfulness meditation in the Buddhist tradition, not wildly different from what some people see in nature practices, how nature can calm people down. But the key is, with all these practices, and they're available to people, there's apps for them now and stuff like that. I have an app on my phone called the Centering Prayer app. It's got little prayers at the beginning, prayers at the end, a timer, chimes, stuff like that. You can, while we're doing this, I'll pull the chimes up just so people can hear how beautiful they are.
Yeah, let me hear that.
But these, can you hear that? It's not loud. This is just on a phone.
Do it one more time.
It's coming. Can you hear it? Hold on. It's a long, slow chime, see? And it helps you quiet down.
Okay, I heard it.
So, this is not the only one you can use, but there are ways to, now, people are very uncomfortable with silence. Like if I said, let's be silent for a minute, you guys would probably be like, this is weird.
That was a big part of my job. I think silence is one of the most intimate things, truly one of the most intimate things.
One of my teachers, Thomas Keating, says silence is God's first language. Everything else is translation.
But there's so much truth to that. And even in having a conversation and having that intentional silence, it can be an incredible tool to get many messages across, but also to reflect and take in and interpret that information.
Yeah, but the first step is to distance yourself from your distracted mind. Distance yourself from the to-do list, from the Red Sox cap, from the dinner, what am I going to eat, did I do my exercise, my back hurts, whatever it is. Let those thoughts go long enough. Could be just a split second where you can take a deep breath and have your energy and your center all held, not stolen by distraction. Right. And in those practices, again, every religious tradition has them, and neuroscience is telling us now that you can create these neural pathways where you can reprogram your brain. We all have our reactions to drugs, to alcohol, to sex, to violence, to money, to all these things. And we get programmed, we get stuck. Well, I'm guessing a lot of your listeners, like me, you get stuck. I don't want to do this, but I do it. Right? Mm-hmm. What's neuroscience telling us? You can actually reprogram yourself so that when the trigger happens that makes you want to do X or Y or Z, you can create a new neural pathway, but you have to actually allow your mind to move and reshape the neural pathway. You can reprogram your own brain. So if you're hearing in me, oh, this is all religion, I don't believe that crap, that's okay. Don't have to believe it. But look at the science that it will show us that by in a lot of places, and workplaces are now doing this. They're starting mindful moments at work. This was with second graders. I teach when I teach teachers, I say, here's what we do with second graders. You teach children how to turtle.
Right. And
this is how you turtle. You put one arm on one shoulder, the other on the other shoulder. And when you're feeling frustrated or angry or out of control, you go into your shell. And the little second graders all do this. This is no big deal. And they go in their shell and they take 3 deep breaths. And then you can train people in a little bit of positive self-talk. I can handle this. I'm okay. I can come up with a plan. I have something positive to say here on this podcast. Take a deep breath and come back out of your shell when you're ready.
Wow.
Just those little examples can shift the culture. Imagine if we taught members of Congress to turtle. I'm not even kidding. Now, you think I'm joking.
Absolutely. No, it's spot on.
But, we've seen this like with community health workers and stuff like that, with cops. The Navy SEALs are now teaching box breathing for moments of extraordinary pressure, how to follow your breath, even in the midst of potential combat and conflict situations. So these practices, they sound like they have an ancient aura or maybe a new age aura, but they're actually wisdom from our fathers and mothers is being handed to us, and we would do well to take it and try many of these practices. Like I said, we can teach these to second graders. We sure as heck should be able to teach it to CEOs or marketing executives or media members. I mean, look at what's on the media. I mean, you guys are in the media. Look at the hate and contempt and reactivity. And, people make a lot of money with hate and contempt and reactivity, but really, is that helping anything?
Not at all.
I mean, not at all on either. I mean, we got to say it. We got to be honest. It's on both sides.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hatred is hatred, so we got to be honest that our culture now, in some parts of it, is becoming more contempt filled, more scapegoating, more othering.
Right.
But at the same time, there's other movements underneath of that story that I think are healing and hopeful movements.
Absolutely.
And going back.
Hold on, Ben. I just got to say this, Tim. The reprogram that you're speaking on, I personally experienced that during my time in incarceration. I got introduced to Nichiren Buddhism while incarcerated, and I grew up in a strict religious home. My father, shout out Pastor Paulin, he's a reverend, and my mother is a pastor as well. So I grew up as a PK, playing the drums, all that, and pretty much, exploded when I left the house, pretty much. And so when I went to prison,
that can happen.
Yeah. So when I went to prison, I was trying to go back to the old teachings, and it wasn't working for me. But then when I got introduced to Buddhism and I started meditating and chanting, and reading, certain books like Think and Grow Rich and so many different self-help books, and the reprogramming that I did, like the way you just explained it, I never had real terminology explained on the experience I went through, but the way you just explained it is exactly what I experienced in prison, and I was able to change basically 180. And it started with the positive self-talk, telling myself I love myself, because I never told myself I love myself until I was in the worst situation of my life. And if I can change in literally a Bayside State prison, then anyone could change in any situation. And you're spot on. And I think, this podcast and all the stuff that you got going on is just other tools to share that with the world and give them these tools.
It's beautiful. I'm sure Kevin. Do you know Shaka Senghor? Do you know his work at all? Or Lawrence Bartley? Both of them are people who had profound conversion experiences in prison. Lawrence Bartley, the book behind me, I don't know if you can see it, The Call to Unite. He's got a selection in there that is, I highly recommend it. It's only 2 pages long, but he describes, finding himself in solitary, and the whole circumstances around it. But he also describes, and for several months, but he then describes the power and the transformational experience of finally freeing himself from destructive thoughts, finally freeing himself from the desire to blame and shame and himself and others. Right. And he's now a beautiful, beautiful writer. I mean, you should have him as a guest on the podcast for sure. He's fantastic. I don't know how old Lawrence is, maybe mid-30s, something like that. He's a young guy, and he's been through it. But, we all have, what I wouldn't want to say is, like, you got to go to prison to do this, right? I mean, yes, it can happen in prison, but we are all in prisons of our own making. Mm-hmm. And we all got to wake up and see them, if you ask me. And when you see that we're making, sometimes we're in prisons somebody else made, but a lot of times we're in prisons we've made. And I love this story, and forgive this metaphor if you've heard it before, but when you train a dog with an invisible fence, the dog runs up against the fence and gets zapped, right? And the dog learns not to go up near the fence. you can take the invisible fence away after a year and the dog still won't go there.
Right.
Sometimes we think there's a fence around us and it's been long removed. Sometimes we think we're trapped by a certain behavior, a certain problem, a certain condition, a certain inevitability. And sometimes we just got to realize that fence is not there anymore. Maybe it was there. Maybe my mother put something there, my father put something there, or my former boss, or my ex-boyfriend, or wife, or girlfriend, or whatever it is, or husband, or partner. Or sometimes we have to free ourselves of these prisons, but we have to do it at some level only by recognizing there's always this moment where you go, okay, I got to change. I got to look for something. I need a new vocabulary. I need to be able to say I love myself. Mm-hmm. I need, I used to do this with my kids. Well, I didn't used to do, I did it once. I said, just one day I'm going to sit you down. I'm going to put my hands over your eyes. And when I open them up, I want you to look at something that's really beautiful. Okay, get ready, get ready, get ready. And I take my hands off and it's a mirror.
Yeah, that's a great skill right there.
Just for a minute. And you can start giggling, you can be uncomfortable, but just for a minute, I want you to know that when you look in the mirror, you look at something God created and determined is beautiful.
That's powerful, man. That's powerful. I'm still in that, Tim. That's whoo. Because that's the stuff that's not taught. That's the stuff that's not common, especially in households. And it's just what it is. My parents are amazing people, but that's not the stuff that we were doing.
Yeah.
You know? And I think a lot of people I grew up with didn't experience that. And those are those things, it might sound small, but those things that could really change the trajectory of a kid or an adult or any human. So I think that's powerful. That's powerful.
And this is where we need our religious leaders to, I don't want to say change. Maybe I do want to say change. I mean, I respect so much pastors like your mom and dad who work are reading the Bible and preparing sermons and ministering to the sick and counseling the people in tough times and visiting people in prison and all that kind of stuff. They work, they don't get much credit out in the big world, but I have enormous respect for people in religious ministry. And they shoulder a lot of other people's pain, and they do the best they can a lot of times. Most of them weren't prepared for religious to teach people how to find the experience of God. They were prepared to teach people how to understand the word of God or the lessons or the rules or the guidelines or who to believe about God, but they weren't taught how to experience the divine. That just wasn't, it's just not, and this is Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, they just weren't, most of them just aren't taught. Now, sometimes in the monasteries they were taught, not always. Sometimes, the deeper people that studied the mystics, I mean, I was lucky to study the mystics, and most people don't know that much about that inner experience. They don't know how to understand the depth of the personal gift of divine experience, not divine message, not divine lessons, not divine rules, not divine, texts.
All right.
So anyway, I think that's where we got to get to. And it's not just religious leaders, it's all of us. We've just got to get to a place of renewed spirit, what I call spiritual realism. A realism which means this is not something that I'm pretending is up in the sky. This is your most authentic self is a self-oriented towards the goodness and love and beauty and truth in the whole universe. I just think empirically speaking. When I mean empirically, I mean like there is a factual basis for that being Kevin, Ben, Tim. That's our most authentic self. That's not made up.
Yeah.
And we need, lost one of the greats, great spiritual and political leaders in Bishop Tutu. And I love one story he told when I was lucky enough to hear him giving a speech. Someone asked a question, said, Archbishop Tutu, isn't evil more powerful than good? And he answered, he said, no, it is not more powerful than good, but it is better organized.
Damn. Damn.
So we got to be a little unashamed of organizing around the goodness in the human person. A little unapologetic, little like take the chance that someone's going to make fun of you and mock you because you'd start talking about loving your enemies. Like if somebody said that, you're like, oh, that's weird. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. The best stories in literature, the most powerful stories in our personal lives are almost always about something where darkness yields to light in some unexpectedly beautiful way.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great segue. You've had, it sounds like, the privilege to be the executive producer of numerous movies.
Yes.
Can you speak just a little bit about that? So one in particular, I think it's probably one of the more recent ones, Peanut Butter Falcon. Mm-hmm. One of actually like top 3 favorite movies of all time. It was literally the perfect movie. No fat on it, right to the point, just absolutely brilliant. Can you, and I think what you just kind of mentioned certainly plays true in many of the films that you've produced. Can you speak a little bit to what that experience was like and just kind of how you got involved in that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a film producer in the traditional sense. What I've been privileged to do is see right in front of my face extraordinary stories that most of the world doesn't see. The first film I was involved with is Amistad. That's because I was teaching it. I was teaching in New Haven. It was a local story, and I was like, "Oh my God, this should be a movie," And nobody had ever heard of the Amistad affair. So, I had a friend of mine who was in graduate school screenwriting. He wrote the script. I got an agent to read it, took it out to Hollywood, and 3 years later, Steven Spielberg was making the Amistad. I didn't make it. Wow. I said, and Debbie Allen will tell you, by the way, that she had the idea before I did, but that's okay because we're best friends on it. So, Peanut Butter Falcon is another story. Like people they see someone with Down syndrome and they go, sorry, hopeless case. And I've had 20 years of being able to see people with Down syndrome just do the most extraordinary things and have the greatest sense of humor and have the capacity to change, people from anger and hostility and sadness to joy. Just extraordinary human qualities. So, this story came along and I got a chance to read the script and the producer approached me and said, would I be willing to join with them? And I was like, this story is irreverent. It's authentic. It's real. And it'll shock people because people will see a side of humanity they don't normally see. This is not the story of, the most beautiful starlet and the most handsome star. This is not the stylized story of the most dramatic escape from the most extraordinary bank robbery. This is a story that will blow you away because it makes you think, oh my God, I never thought humanity could be that cool, that beautiful, that cool, right? It's not just a nice story, it's a cool story.
It is.
So Zach Gotts, he's fantastic in this movie. He's freaking-tastic. And, there's other stars in the movie too, but I'm not even going to mention them because he's the killer. He's the one, and people are, in some ways they're shocked, but in other ways it's just a great story. So, I've been lucky. I think a lot of us, see great stories and, I've had the means, which is just something that was a gift to me, but I've tried to use it well. I've had the means to try to get those stories to people who could get them made. And that's what I've done.
Yeah, and I want to. It was a gift, but it was something that you worked so incredibly hard. And if you didn't become your, for lack of better terms, true self back in teaching, I mean, all of these things you put the work in, and you facilitated just so many wonderful, 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 wonderful things. I want to be mindful of time. I know we have to wrap up in a minute. Can you quickly? I have two questions. One, can you just speak to Unite a little bit? Because I know we didn't. A lot of what we talked about certainly, I'm going to assume, laid the groundwork for Unite to become a thing.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in the midst of a very, very serious cultural crisis. I think in our country, and to some extent other parts of the world, but certainly in our country, we are. People say it's a crisis of income inequality. It's a crisis around race. There's a crisis around the environment. There's a crisis around the border. There's a crisis around, all these different things. And I think they're all true. All those crises exist. But underneath of all of them is a lonely, alienated, searching soul, unable to find meaning and purpose and belonging together. And when you have people that can't find meaning and purpose and belonging together, they opt almost invariably for one experience, and that's scapegoating. They blame other people. Right. They got nowhere else to go. Right. The call to Unite is about, and the work we're doing around Unite Media and other things, Unite Solutions. We're now working on resettling Afghan refugees. Why? Because we know we can get cops and veterans and community activists and faith-based organizations and civic clubs all working across boundaries in common pursuit of meaning and purpose and belonging. So we've got a whole new challenge as a country to build the America that for the first time in the history of the world will be a free, post-racial, post-scapegoating, post-discriminatory democracy. Never happened in history. There's always been one group that was dominant over another. And we now know we can't make it that way. So we got to build a whole new system. We cannot make the future unless we unseat the contempt and scapegoating and fear of the other. Mm-hmm. So we're building projects, like I said, around Afghan refugees, around COVID, around young people that bring these warring factions together. We're building curriculum. I'm working on a program called Dividers Anonymous. We've done some of these. You can see some of the features there. We've done this book, The Call to Unite, which has over 150 or so voices from all, storefront clerks and ex-cons and ex-presidents and billionaires and homeless women. They're all in there. You don't have to. It's not a book about homeless women. It's not a book about billionaires. It's a book about us. Mm.
That's right.
Common spirit. So we need badly to unseat contempt and hatred. That's the one thing people say, well, I'm not compromising my principles to work with them. Don't compromise any principle. I want you to compromise any principle. I want you to add one principle. Treat people with dignity. Treat people with dignity. No hatred. No hatred. That's it. Fight for what you believe in. Believe in what you are willing to fight for. But don't let hate be the means you have for achieving your goal. And if we can do that one thing in our political life, in our cultural life, in our social life, it will open us up to listening and caring for and finding solutions we can't get to today because we've so locked ourselves into a world of contempt.
It's amazing.
So,
Oh, go ahead, Kev. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say. So, what's on the horizon for Unite?
So we're working on. I'm about to launch this thing called Dividers Anonymous, a 12-step program for people who are stuck in divisive ways of thinking. And I'm going to start the program by saying, "Hi, I'm Tim, and I'm a divider." And then I hope you guys will join and say, "Hi, Tim." And then I hope you'll say, "Yeah, I'm Ben, and I'm Kevin," and we'll all kind of admit how much we've been duped and lied to about contempt and division. So that's one thing that's going on. The Afghan resettlement program, welcome.us, is now growing, and we're raising money actually to work with all kinds of civic organizations to resettle Afghan refugees. We're working very hard on what we call a dignity index. So keep this to yourselves or share it broadly, however you want to think about it. But we think in the future, politicians should be judged not just on whether they tell the truth or tell lies, but also on whether they use hate or dignity in their speech and their rhetoric. And I hope we'll be able to give people the tool to put this on their browsers and in their social life, where they can actually see hatred and contempt. Get AI tools to surface it. Doesn't mean you can still go to the site, but so we're working on that, and we're going to relaunch the website probably in about 2 months with some other features, and we hope so we'd love to get writers. So if people listening to this, they want to write about dignity and about unity, send me an email. We're looking to recruit people who want to contribute to our own a platform that will be free of contempt and free of hatred, and tough-minded, and rigorous in pursuit of goals. Conservatives and liberals, you can be passionate about your goals. You just can't. It's a no-hate zone. That's it. That's the only rule. No hate. It's what my mother told me when I was a kid at the dining room table. Hate is a dirty word in this house. You don't hate anybody. I bet, Kevin, your mother and father told you that. If they didn't, they told you something similar, right?
Oh, no, that's exactly what they said.
That's what they said. No hate.
Love all. That's right.
No hate. Not allowed. You can say you don't like somebody. My mother used to say, you can call them elephant ears, but you can't hate. I don't know why she thought of that. She always just said, call them elephant ears, but don't say you hate them.
Yeah, that's real, though, because words got power.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I just want to say this. You give me hope, right? This gives me hope.
And back at you guys, both of you. Really, this has been a pleasure. Let's keep it going. I know we've run over time, but I hope you and your audience. I hope what you're hearing in me is a lot of affirmation for what you're trying to do, and a lot of need that we have to build a community of people who are ready to work hard to make a difference in the world, who have been, as you guys have been, down, but are willing to get back up and willing to help other people get up with us.
That's right. So I got one, because Ben's gonna ask our famous ended question. I know it's coming, but I do have a question for you. You spearheaded and run so many amazing organizations, and as Ben alluded to earlier, we've started a nonprofit 6 years ago called Winning Ways, and we're small, but we're active. We're in halfway houses in New Haven, throughout the state of Connecticut, teaching financial literacy and both men's and women's empowerment groups. And we're giving back. For someone like us that's starting an organization like this, like what would be some advice that you would give to us as we embark, on year 7 and just growing?
Well. First of all, make sure you keep yourself centered and practicing, right? Make sure you keep doing what Kevin learned to do when he was down. Love himself, care for yourself. The most powerful thing in the not-for-profit sector is people whose minds are being driven by healthy and open hearts. And the most common thing I see in people in hard work like you're doing is burnout, frustration, and despair that becomes anger and disappointment. So the first thing is care for yourselves. Mm-hmm. The second thing, practically speaking, is measure. This is something a lot of us in the not-for-profit sector weren't raised to do. At least I wasn't. We take tests and kids and stuff like that. But be able to tell your funders what your outcome is. And that's not an afterthought. That's got to be a foundational thing. Nowadays, it's not just Ben's a good guy, Kevin's a good guy, they're doing good work. The real money will follow data and results. And that's a pain in the neck sometimes, and you wish people didn't have to do that, but I think it's really important. I think there's a lot of money out there for people who believe in the authenticity of your heart. And if you've got the authenticity of your heart in it and you're getting results, I think the sky's the limit.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate
Probably
that.
know that already, but.
And that actually ties into the last question. So I don't even, for the sake of time, I don't even need to ask that, and just reiterate, because I think caring for oneself is so very, very, very important. So just to throw it out, the last question we ask every guest is if you could say one piece of advice to someone who had just fallen down and was really struggling to get back up, what would you say? And actually what you just told us is pretty spot on. I think you can take some of the words out, kind of measuring, having goals for oneself to see if you meet those goals, and then really believing in oneself and staying genuine.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else
the
you want to
moment
add.
the moment of greatest sadness and despair is the moment of great pain. And most people in great pain can't feel anything. But it is often, maybe only in retrospect noticed, but it is often the moment of the greatest possibility. And so if you're down, the first thing you got to know is people, no judgment, no judgment, no judgment from me, no judgment from, I hope, other people, just being with you. Whether you're down because of something you did or something that happened or something that just life. It's okay. No judgment. And know that there are people out here who are not judging you. And all they want to do is be there with you and for you. And once we bond, once we see one another in those moments, then I think healing and recovery is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Again, you've given me great hope tonight. And I truly mean that. So thank you so much for the time.
Let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. I very much like that.
All right.
Yes. Will do.
Take care, guys. Thank you for watching.
Likewise. Have a lovely evening.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.